All right, well, hi everyone. A big warm welcome to those of you who have joined us this morning, this evening, whatever time of day it is for you. Really lovely to see lots of you here. Pleasure to have you here. What would be really nice, if you are willing, is to have a quick introduction from you in the chat. So if you could say hello, just a brief hello and what country you are based in, that would be really nice to see, where we're all from. We will use the chat now for a quick introduction. We will not use the chat so much when the panelists are chatting, and then we will use the chat towards the end for the questions, but you can drop questions in the chat at any point. All right. Thanks everyone. You can also are welcome to change your names and put the country you're based in as part of your Zoom name as well. So my name is Beth. I'm the organizer of this webinar. Really nice to meet you all. The running order for today, I'll do a little bit of housekeeping, just the normal stuff, and then I will introduce the topic briefly. I'll introduce the panelists, and then each panelist will have a little bit mean. They only get 5 minutes to chat about this massive subject of teaching and learning in wildlife conservation. And from there, we'll then head into a discussion and a chat. So that's when your questions will come in. We've got some questions already from the sign up form, but yeah, hopefully lots more questions. Sort of, if there's a thought that pops into your head, something's bugging you, put it in the chat. We'd really love to hear it. We probably won't have time for them all, but we'll try our best to kind of get a diversity of questions in there. If there's time at the end, and this is probably a little bit ambitious, so probably won't happen, but if anyone had any thoughts, or the panel had any thoughts on anything we can do as a community to sort of build momentum around teaching and learning in the conservation sector, and anything we can sort of kickstart or think about to do to improve it and improve the quality of it, then we'd really love to hear that. Any initiatives, kind of throw them our direction. Okay. All right, so housekeeping. Housekeeping, there is a transcript available. If you click on the arrow at the top, I'll copy it into the chat as well. That will be a transcript should you need it. Any issues, let us know. It's not perfect, but it's something. And we have muted you all to make it simpler. So we will be asking taking all of the questions via the chat. So you can put them in there. If you put them to everyone, or we've got helping out today, we've got Mac very kindly helping out with tech, and we've got Terza helping out with tech. So you can private message one of them as well if you'd rather not put it in the open chat. Okay. You're very welcome to have your cameras on. It's really nice to see faces, to put faces to names and all of that. But obviously you don't have to. I know some people will prefer not to. Please bear with us if we have any technical issues. We are all working from home internet, and we all know that that can be flawed. So, if things happen, let us know. We'll try our best to fix it. We've got some backups, but that's where we are. And we are recording this. We will post the recording on WildHub for those who couldn't make it. And this event is part of the WildHub Festival, which Terza is organizing and is run by WildHub community members. So there's lots of really cool stuff happening on there. We'll post the link at the end about all the other events. There's some really cool ones yesterday, some more happening in the future tomorrow. So it's worth checking out what else you might be interested in. And for those of you less familiar with WildHub, it is a member-led international community of conservation professionals, a place to share challenges and solutions. So if you're not already a part of it, then I highly recommend joining and finding out more. So thanks for all your introductions. I'm just going to say a few words on the topic, and I have to slightly restrain myself from not saying too much, because that's the panelist's job, but I could chat about this topic for a long time, so I'll keep it brief. It's as I say, a massive topic which we can only scratch the surface of today. We are focusing on adult education as a way of building capacity in the conservation sector, and this comes in many shapes and sizes. I work for Wild Team UK, which is a small but international charity that aims to give conservationists skills they need to do great conservation work. And we focus on professional skills such as project management and grant writing. But organising this webinar, I must say, isn't part of my job. This is just something I love geeking out on the side. And my role is designing, organising and running training workshops. However, like many in similar positions, I am a conservationist first, not a teacher, not a trainer. And this has meant over the 5+ years that I've been in this job, I've had to get my head around being a better trainer. And this is sort of a never-ending journey, but an exciting one. And I really enjoy training. I really enjoy meeting the people that I train. And there's a lot of room for personal development in it. And ironically, I was the only person in my family not to go into teaching, traditional teaching in the first place. So maybe it's in my blood. And my job over the past 5 years has gotten me really interested in teaching and learning, as it's such a powerful thing to upskill conservationists and share knowledge so we can all do our work better. But it has so much more impact when it's done well. And there's so many skills involved in being a good trainer. You've got communicating, evaluating, empathizing, listening, creativity, organizing, and many more. Some of these are transferable, some of these less so. So yeah, I'm really looking forward to hearing what the panel have to say on this topic. And yeah, we've got a really cool top panel. So I'm going to introduce them all briefly now in the order that they will speak. And then we'll dive into panel speaking. So Lucy Tallents is, give us a wave, Lucy, founder of Verdant Learn, who is passionate about empowering conservationists through enhancing access to learning via openly licensed online courses. So yeah, really admire Lucy's focus on open access stuff, which is great. And we've got Stu Patterson, who works for Conservation Leadership Program. Thanks, Stu. These guys direct project funding and training to early career leaders from developing countries who are tackling priority conservation challenges. We've got Jamie Cupsey, who is Director of Training at IUCN Species Survival Commission Conservation Planning Specialist Group. And then we've got Mazza, and Mazza works for the Nature Conservancy in America. So she's much earlier in the day than us. More full of beans, maybe. Mazza is program manager for science professional development and capacity building programs, which is just really cool job title. We've got Helen Gath, so conservation training officer from Durrell Wildlife Conservation Trust, based at the trust headquarters and academy in Jersey. Helen is part of a small team that oversees the planning and delivery of a range of training courses for conservation practitioners from a diverse background, from GIS to leadership development, like loads of really cool stuff that they're doing. And last but not least, Mark, who is the organizer of the incredible international capacity building conferences, which are an amazing place for meeting people and chatting about all things capacity building, and is also a senior lecturer at the University of Gloucestershire. Okay, so let's dive straight in. We're starting with Lucy. Go for it, Lucy, please.
Thank you, Beth. Okay, so just a little bit about my journey. I started off, I've been doing capacity building ever since I've been doing field work and learning with my field colleagues and field assistants and learning from them and helping them to develop their skills. And it's something I've always really enjoyed. Actually, when I first did my biology degree, my grandparents said to me, so what are you going to do with that? Well, obviously you're going to become a teacher, because what else can you do with a biology degree? And I was like, no, never, not going to become a teacher. So actually I found I really, really enjoy it. And the more I do it, the more I enjoy it. My longest role has been with WildCrew, the Wildlife Conservation Research Unit at Oxford University. But I stopped working there a few years ago to set up my own company called Verdant Learn. And I was committed to opening up learning opportunities globally for conservation professionals, and really keen to try and reach more people than I was able to whilst working at university, because there were limitations on who we could accept on the courses. Naturally, being a university, people had to have certain qualifications. It was very competitive. We couldn't offer very many places, and I thought that there was a niche for me elsewhere, going freelance and opening up more opportunities for learning. So about a year ago, I decided that I was going to openly license all of my courses, and this has definitely made the business model more complicated for Verdant Learn. If I'm just giving away my course materials for free, then I have to work harder to earn money in other ways. And it slows the process down of releasing courses as well, because I'm doing some consultancy work to support myself. But I just really strongly believe that the best way to increase conservation capacity is to remove barriers to learning. And I know that this is not to play down any of the work that all of my colleagues here are doing, because I think what everyone is doing is amazing, and everyone is working as hard as they can in different ways and within the remit of their organization. But for me, the choice is to go open. And what I mean by openly licensing is that I create the courses and then put them online for free. They're there for anyone to access. At the moment, there's just one course, but there will be more coming next year. But also to put a license on them that gives people permission to reuse them, to make changes to them, and to share those changes under the same license. So specifically, I use a Creative Commons CC BY, so attribution share alike license. And that's because I also want to try and empower educators who may want to teach a certain skill, know about it themselves, but maybe not have the time to put in to develop online learning materials, because it's very time consuming. And also because I felt like it's the best way to open up to collaborations, because I would really love to do more courses with more collaborators, because I feel that the best courses arise from bringing multiple people in with all their different approaches to teaching or their own specific expertise, and you get more voices on the course. And you get more perspectives, you get more expertise to draw on the pool of educators. But I also firmly believe in trying to co-create with students, and that's something I'm really pushing myself to do more of at the moment. So openly licensing a course means that my students can work with me to improve that course, and they will be credited for all of the effort that they put in, for any feedback that they give, for any materials that they contribute or ideas that they have. So I'm really committed to try and work better with my students, because I recognize that teaching something is a really good way of testing what you know about it, and developing your understanding further and applying it in different ways. Beth, tell me, do I have any more time to talk? I don't want to take too long.
You can have another minute. So generous.
Okay. So just very quickly on how I educate myself. While I was at Oxford, I had the opportunity to do a higher education academy, to do the process to become a fellow of the higher education academy and submit a portfolio. And during that process, I got mentored by an amazing teacher called Chris Trevitt, who's not in conservation, but he's a wonderful person. And I really benefited from that opportunity to discuss and think and read the literature. These days, I try to attend capacity building conferences inside and outside conservation. I read blogs, I read research papers when I can find the time, which is challenging, I have to say. And I try and have conversations with people about how they teach.
Thanks so much. Yeah, that was really nice to hear that, Lucy. Something I want just to add to that is, when I hear people talking about training and courses that they develop, it makes me really want to be on the other side of it, of be the learning person, taking part in the courses, because I think that's a really cool experience. This definitely isn't a one-way thing. And you're doing an amazing job of making it a multi-way thing. And yeah, so thank you very much. Next up, we have Stu. Go for it, Stu, please.
Thanks, Beth. So yeah, I'm Stu Patterson. I'm Executive Manager of the Conservation Leadership Programme, which is a partnership between BirdLife International, Fauna and Flora International, and the Wildlife Conservation Society. And grabbing that that thread that you've thrown out, or the rope you've thrown out, Beth, and how we started off and sitting on the other fence. When I first started working with CLP back in 2008, I was invited to be part of our conservation management and leadership training course as one of the staff. But I remember my boss at the time saying, you know, this is your first time being on this training course. It's a 2-week training course. You're here to meet the trainees and to work with the trainees and find out about the projects which they're doing. But as it's your first time, you know, why don't you sit and be one of the trainees and be one of the participants on the course, which was a fantastic and really privileged opportunity to have, because it meant that I got to see and meet the trainers and the facilitators from that side. I got to see how the practical exercises worked. And I think even to this day, it's held me in really, really good stead. We still run some of those training courses and other things that have helped me to develop. It was in part of a facilitation skills workshop, which Darryl led about 10 years ago. And that to this day has been incredibly useful. The things in terms of group dynamics, facilitating group discussions and planning for difficult conversations and thinking about sort of convergent thinking has held in really good stead for delivering training, but also empathizing and understanding the perspectives and the conditions that people are working in when we're supporting them to deliver their projects. So the training courses that CLP offers and why they're important, it's one of the main training courses that we offer is on management and leadership training. And the readiness for trainees, I think, is paramount. So having participants who are going to be able to implement and to deliver work which is relevant to their courses is something which we're really conscious of. So if we have an application process, are they going to be so if it's in project planning and fundraising, are they going to be committed to submitting an application very, very soon after the course? If they're going to be leading, learning about leadership and management, are they going to be leading and managing a project immediately after the course, which is something which we do with our portfolio. And it's, I think, coming into training, it's understanding that whatever we're delivering has to result in a positive action. So the readiness is not just about sitting and getting a certificate. It's not just sitting through and getting to the end of the course. It's seeing where there's going to be concrete action and clear objectives for the trainees at the end of the course. We've adapted quite a lot in the last 2 years to bring things completely online. But one thing which we're super conscious of is the time and energy that it takes to support learning, support adult learning. Most of our trainees are early in their career, so there's lots of energy. There's lots of new ideas which are flowing around. Some of our trainees are working in isolation, so we want to use the 1, 2, 3 week training courses up to now. It's much longer. So we're doing things, we're extending them, we're delivering them online to provide a sort of a healthy and an open environment where there's plenty of opportunities for discussion, there's plenty of opportunities for practical, and there's plenty of opportunities for peer learning and for the trainees to learn about the projects and for us to pick up new ideas. So there's always something to learn. We've also tried to pick up on different cultural contexts. So my colleagues who are delivering leadership training are particularly interested in involving trainees and trainers and experts who have significant subject expertise in leadership. And the inclusivity, I think that also helps. So if we're working on project planning and fundraising training, to have donors who really understand local context and can be brought on board, and it's a way for us to learn as well. I've never delivered training in isolation. I've always learned from co-trainers. I think that's really important for us as trainers to be able to recognize when there are dips in energy, when there's particularly buoyant times, that we have somebody to share that with. It also helps for us to be able to sort of check in with a co-trainer. Is this going okay? When there's a time of self-work or group reflections, to be able to sort of work with colleagues on doing that. And I think both CLP and Fauna and Flora International have a very good, strong culture of learning, supporting after action reviews and pause and reflect. We do that almost on a daily basis during the training courses, and that helps us to sort of keep a pace, monitor what we're doing during the course, but also to reflect and see how we can improve things afterwards. I've reached my 5 minutes, so I'll stop there, and happy to include anything else when there's time for questions. Thanks, Beth.
Impressive what you managed to fit into 5 minutes. Thanks very much. Okay, let's go next to Jamie. Jamie, do you want to take the stage?
Thanks, Beth. So I'll start off by saying that I'm a failed vet. Always wanted to do that. Realized quite early on in my schooling that there was no way I was going to get the grades, and so fell into doing zoology, but then went on a bit of a journey, which I think I found it quite instructive as a trainer in terms of doubling a range of topics from anthropology to teaching in schools. I did a PCE and did management and leadership training through the Chartered Management Institute, and kind of drifted a bit between the sort of the charitable sector and the more sort of commercial sector. But all with the eye on the prize of finding my place within the conservation world. And I've always been impressed by the sort of the passion and the determination, the focus of many of the colleagues that I have worked with over the years. Realized that I had none of that, but what was fascinating was that even though we all work within the field of conservation biology, which is supposed to be a cross-disciplinary science, the reality was we were sort of like, you know, multiple boxes on an Amazon lorry, each, you know, focusing on a different aspect of conservation work. Well, actually, but we were still within our boxes, and I think we still sit within those boxes. There are efforts to change that, and I think one of the most valuable philosophies that one can put across to both to peers as well as to next generations and those above us too, is the need to branch out, to reach beyond our field, and to be open to and to listen to others. And I spent most of my time in the last few years focusing on kind of management, facilitation, conflict resolution, and leadership training, which I find very interesting. You end up, I think, as a trainer being a bit of a choreographer. I don't think you need to be particularly expert in any one subject, but you need to recognize that this is a learning journey that recipients are going on, as well as those people involved in delivering. And there needs to be some guide that sort of helps to keep that storyline going throughout the whole of that experience. And the key sort of take home for me for training has been, you know, begin with the end in mind. You know, where is it we're actually wanting to get to? I think too much training is essentially sort of knowledge development and awareness raising, which is fine. You know, it's a step along the way. But if we're honest with ourselves, what we want is people to do things better or to do things differently, and that requires clarity around where you're wanting to get to, and working back from that point. So that you do keep focused on what's involved. I find the term that it's very sort of jargony, but instructional objectives is quite helpful. You know, rather than saying, well, we want people to understand how or be aware of whatever it might be at the end of the training, but to say, what is it they're able to do? You know, can they ride a bike at the end of this training safely on a road? Hopefully not, because it's in the conservation sector, and it will be something else. But those sorts of tangible skills and abilities to do something within a particular context, and keep that as your central guiding light in how you then design programs that you will then deliver. And in terms of kind of how I sort of learn and develop, bring the best people in the world together to run the training course, and then you get free training. You know, that's why I think we've got a wonderful opportunity to kind of bring these different skill sets in, each of which is quite specialized, sometimes like a vet as well, and they are able to convey some deep knowledge and skills around their areas. And become a recipient at that time and take that on board, stepping up every now and again to make sure that the glue is made between what somebody has said and what the next person's going to say, and how this all hangs together to achieve what, you know, the change you want to affect in the people that you're working with. Full stop. I don't know how long that was, but I think it was in 5 minutes.
Yeah, very well kept time. Thank you very much. I really liked your description of training as a choreographer, of sort of, it's almost like conducting, isn't it, of bringing everything together. And I would also like to add that I'm a bit of a failed vet. That was my initial career path, and I quickly realised it was not going to be. but I'm fine with that. Okay, now we are going to hand over to Maza. Over to you, Maza.
Hi, everyone. 5 minutes, so I'll do my best. I'm Maza. I've been with the Nature Conservancy designing and managing science professional skills development programs for TNC's researchers and scientists for the past 2.5 years. I'm happy to report that we trained over 700 staff in just a couple of years, and we have so many lessons learned, and I'm happy to hear my colleagues, but also understand some of the common challenges we all have. But to summarize, we offer these trainings that are, we have to make sure that the major lesson we learned that is that we have to make sure that we offer trainings that are needed for now, but also for the future, which makes it a little challenging. And all these trainings have to be accessible by all. From the get-go, we make sure that diversity and inclusion are part of everything we do within the program, but within our department as well. And we tried our best for each trainer to have at least the latest, Beth can attest, I made her go through a number of revisions and work to make sure that we have the latest curriculum that's suitable for our staff. I myself do that personally. For example, I took 2 fellowships within different departments so that I am aware of the common challenge we have. I did one fellowship with the learning team within the organization. It's a large organization, more than 4,000 employees, so it's hard to keep track of where everything is. So the second fellowship I did was our diversity, inclusion, and equity department, which I value both of them so that I'm again are updated on the most common issues and try to use our trainings to solve or be part of the solution for the common challenge. And I can talk about education just like Beth for hours on this topic. But in the interest of time, I can share a few points. I think the lesson and the key part we have to take in terms of learning within conservation, in conservation learning is that we can't afford to be ineffective. So we have to make every effort we can to make sure that our trainings are evolving as much as the field itself. And we must, to do that, we have to be effective in our learning as well. In order to improve our own skills, I think it's all about keeping up with the evidence for learning. We are very big as a science-based organization. We are very big on data, and what the data tells us is what we will offer as a training. And also we have to spend as much time as possible with our trainees and understand where these conservationists are coming from. What are they, spend some time with them to the point that you have the first-hand information. We don't get, I myself don't have the opportunity to go to the field as much as I want. So I have to immerse myself from time to time to understand their challenge. Finally, I think conservation, as any of other fields, need to do a better job of making time for learning. One of the major challenges we have within our organization, at least, is everyone is tasked 100% or more to some extent, and no one makes the time to do this. So we have designed a few areas where the management and their team can help them carve out, good time so that they can participate in this professional skills development program or any kind of learning that will help them improve in their project, but also help in the overall impact of the work they are doing. I think we shouldn't stop learning. I think that's the main lesson. That's the only way to be more effective. I understand that's a very hard thing to do for some people because of we are always attached to the mission and we want to achieve a number at any cost. So I'll stop here and I'll be happy to answer any questions later. And I hope it's 5 minutes only.
Yeah, thank you very much for sharing. Yeah, it's brilliant that you guys are able to try and solve that challenge of not having enough time for training, because you know, I have that challenge myself, and it is tricky in a crisis discipline such as conservation, where you wanted to keep doing stuff rather than stopping and learning. So yeah, that's brilliant. Thank you. Next, we're going to have Helen. Over to you, Helen.
Thank you very much. I think we're definitely all going to be asking Reza what the secret is to that then. Finding time. Okay, right, I've got my time again. So I guess one of the key topics that we're talking about today is why do we need and why should we have a greater amount of quality and quantity of training for adults in conservation when a lot of us don't come from a professional training background. I would love to have gone and done a PGC, and I would love to if I still had time now. I don't, but I don't think that merits my others' teaching being any less important and valuable. I think that's so important because as conservation and wildlife protection and our understanding of it is such a rapidly growing and diversifying field, we need the teaching and the access to that learning to reflect that. So quickly we're understanding new technologies, we're identifying new threats, we're coming up with solutions and answers, but what we're not able to do is to communicate that as quickly. So teaching can be a strong link there. It can be that solution for this kind of gap that exists between the conservation action that's going on the field and a lot of the research that's happening behind that as well. And very often we're too narrowed down in our being busy in the field, conducting conservation research, and it's very, very valuable, but we're not stepping back to understand and teach about what we're doing and convey that back to researchers. And just as similarly, those in sort of an academic and a research environment don't necessarily always have that time and that connection to understand how this really relates into the field. Does it work? What are the results of it? So I think building this connection between the two, the answer here can be improving access to and the quality and the quantity of training. I think having a broader amount of training for adults in conservation should also really help to encourage organisations themselves to create and embed a learning culture to maximise their impact. We just heard that obviously the hardest part is finding time, but actually if we can start to integrate this into the culture of organisations, then that will reap benefits in enormity and allow individuals to draw upon their strengths and really maximise their team success. And I think it's about so much more than just having a huge repertoire of skills. It shouldn't be about having a box ticking exercise, and it's about having someone and others support you in understanding what the best you can be is at school and what talents you can draw upon. So when we learn at a younger age, sort of we learn the basic skill sets that set us up for conservation or perhaps at university, but we're taught in a totally different way. We're taught how to answer a specific question, but actually we really need to be working out how do we ask the right questions to answer I've got more words on that, but yeah, how do we find the answers to those questions, which I think certainly then takes me on to, so what can trainers do to improve? As I said, I don't come from a teaching background, but I've always really loved engaging and enthusing others, and I really enjoy seeing others learn and grow from certain experiences and sharing my knowledge as well. And I think that's a really valuable part of teaching, is having gone away and had a variety of experiences, from in the field to academia to working with various cultures. I think that really is a strong point to then be able to incorporate into your teaching. So what can trainers do to improve? I think teaching as a team is really, really helpful. And actually that's quite accessible now. You move online, you can have a colleague or a friend that joins in on a teaching session with you to give feedback, but also for you to learn from them as well. So really try and teach as a team to learn and observe and draw upon their skills and knowledge. I think alongside this, it's been brought up already, but have a good monitoring and evaluation system. So we like to monitor our conservation projects and our work that we do, but I think we also need to have, as Jamie said, have that end goal in sight, and having a system set up to know what is it that I want to achieve, how am I going to get there, and being able to reflect upon that and learn from that is really important. And I think that's when it's really important as well to be familiar with what those fundamentals of teaching are. Even if you haven't gone away and done an official training course and how to be a teacher or train, I think you can still easily access what those fundamentals are. So you know, learning objectives, knowledge checks, is it accessible? What style do you need to use? And as many of us have already experienced and said already, keep being a student. I love still attending courses because I love to continue learning, but I also love the opportunity to be that recipient on the end of the learning and sort of have that experience all over again, what works, what doesn't work. And you can also draw upon ideas of that trainer themselves. And I think one of the best things that I'm still trying to develop, and I hope one day I'll get there, is that when you're teaching, try and learn to tell a story. If any of you have sat in lectures, I think the best ones that you remember, the ones that you draw upon, are where it never really felt like it was a lesson at all, but you came away having really filled you've been inspired, gained some practical knowledge as well, and can go on and apply that. And one of the best ways is to be able to do that through a story. And that's my alarm. Very brief.
Yeah, that was amazing. Thank you so much. And yeah, there's so much useful stuff in there, like the peer-to-peer learning of having group teaching and having someone sit in on you. That's so powerful. And as you say, it's made a lot easier by remote learning. And yeah, telling a story, it's just, yeah, absolutely agree with that. Yeah, I like the way you put it off, you know, not even realizing you're learning. That's the best way of learning. So thanks so much for all that wisdom. Message from Lucy, just to read out. It's so inspiring hearing everyone's enthusiasm and commitment. So yeah, and I absolutely agree with that. Thanks for sharing that, Lucy. We're doing fine for time, so this is good. So please do keep your questions coming in the chat. As I said, either do it as in the public chat for everyone to see, or private message Mac or Terza, and then we'll work through them. And you know, no questions too small, keep them coming. We'll put them, ask them to the panel if we can. And last but not least, for the final panelist of the evening is Mark O'Connell. Over to you, Mark.
Thanks, Beth. Can you hear me okay? Is that okay? Okay. So the world is in a precarious and fragile state. You all know that. But ask yourselves how you know that. You know that because people like me have spent the last 35 years out there collecting data on the environment from very unyielding environments, collecting data that can be then changed into information that can then be changed into action or policy. And that's what I've been spending my life doing. So I worked in the Lake District National Park to begin with. I then worked for many years for the British Antarctic Survey doing research in Antarctica. I then was head of research down at the Wildfowl and Wetlands Trust at Slimbridge, famous sort of international reserve, and also had my own environmental consultancy. But all of it was about getting data from the environment and converting it into conservation. Data about the environment, what's happening to it, what are the threats, where are species distributed, how abundant are they, what are their trends, and so on. So for the last 4 years, I guess this is the more mature years of my career. I hate to say near the ending of my career, but the idea is now to train the next generation of conservation scientists. And I would say that there's never been a more important time to do that. Bizarrely enough, there is a sort of contrast here, but it's actually a golden age because things are so bad. So we've got a need for so many to get into conservation science, and we need good people in conservation science. But I want to talk about two tensions. So I run a master's course in applied ecology. I do some undergraduate teaching as well. But the two things that I would want to mention is, first of all, the tension between what they think they need and what we think they need from long years of experience. So a classic example of that is they tell us they want the skill of, I don't know, sampling insects. So they want to know how to operate an insect trap. And they think that's it. But of course, there is a much longer process there. There is asking the question, selecting data, the correct data, Then there is the little bit of actually collecting those data, operating the insect trap. Then you've got to manage those data, analyze those data, interpret those data, communicate those data. And that longer process encompasses a range of different skills. If you know how to operate an insect trap, but don't know where to put it, don't know what to do with the data, don't know how to communicate it, there is no point in getting that skill. So it has to be part of a longer train of skill sets that they need. And the second tension that we find is the difficulty with plugging in to conservation. So again, there is no point in doing all of the field work that I've spent my life doing unless it plugs in somewhere. And that is a skill that needs to be taught. It's not something that is automatically there. It has to be positively tackled. So lots of information is put out there and just stays there. It is passive. It does nothing. It doesn't change anything, and it's not picked up. And there are various reasons why that is the case. But one of the reasons is the relevance of those data. So what I've been working on for a number of years is not a top-down academic-driven agenda for conservation in terms of what they need to know, but a grassroots agenda for asking practitioners, what is it you need science to tell you? That's it. I'll stop there, Beth. Thank you.
That was wonderful. Thanks, Mark. That's yeah, lots of really interesting stuff. Good to hear about the tensions and all of the what people want to know and what people could ideally do with knowing. So thank you very much for sharing. So we've now got half an hour of questions, and as I mentioned at the beginning, if anyone has any thoughts to weave into this, panel included, we can do at the end. We might run out of time. It's just sort of dropping it in there as a thought, as a seed of ways that we can help the next generation of trainers. We can help ourselves as trainers. You know, we're always all going to be trying to be better trainers. It's not, there's no end point to that. But yeah, as a sector, as an idea, if there's anything on there, do drop that in and keep the questions coming in the chat. So I'm going to kick off with one question, and then I will trial this first question at just being open to the panel, and the first person to speak can be the first person to chat about it. So this one actually came from the Google form, but there has been other people mentioning this in the chat as well, interestingly. And it's a really good question. So how would you ensure that your training is accessible to everyone? And in the chat, we had in particular language accessibilities, and several people have mentioned accessibility, because online training offers broader accessibility in many ways, but makes a traditional translation more challenging. And sort of automatic translation tools can be very disappointing. And that's from Martha Kimmel. So any suggestions from the panelists? Who wants to kickstart that one?
I've got a thought actually that relates to someone's comment earlier, that and an idea I've been starting to think about some of our own training courses is bringing back students to be a part of that teaching process. So they have obviously undergone that training themselves. They have a vague idea, and hopefully an even better idea once they finish their training with you, but of the concepts that need to be delivered perhaps in their home country or to who is requiring this training, and get them to be a part of that training and that conversion of information. So that not only allows them to practice and develop their skills, but allows them to communicate it back to their own country, organization, wherever they're coming from, that needs that translation in a way that's going to be relevant. So I think that's so important, from languages, from cultures, from having the right dynamics between individuals as well. You know, you never know what previous tensions there might be. So actually it can be easier to relate and learn to someone that's from your own background and cultures. So I think trying to bring in previous alumni and sort of train them up as well and train their training skills is one possibility. I don't know what others feel about that.
I think that's a great idea. I also think it's really valuable to encourage people to share case studies and stories. So obviously translating it and localizing it is, as you say, far more than simply translating the language and getting the technical language correctly translated, which is the biggest problem if you're relying on artificial intelligence for translation. But it's also the making it approachable by having case studies that are relevant, that are based in that area, that are respectful of that culture. And that's not something that we can do as individuals. So it's a great idea to bring on the learners and to also diversify the collaborators that you work with. In terms of addressing the weaknesses of artificial intelligence, there are tools out there that allow you to work with real people and artificial intelligence in combination. So you can get the whole lot translated by AI and have real people then do a better job on the bits that really need them. So it all depends very often on the vocabulary and the complexity of the technical language and the balance of that compared to just everyday language.
I think Jamie, and then we've got lots of hands up, but Jamie first, please.
Well, not wanting to swim against the tide, but I would question, why do you want to have the training accessible to all? Because I think it is important. I think the broader you go, the shallower you go. And I think increasingly that while training courses are very helpful in raising awareness and will move people a certain amount towards action, and this partly comes from sort of work being done with Brett, who's on this call just now, increasingly realizing that actually the deeper learning comes from those relationships that develop beyond the formal training. Whether it's mentoring or coaching or sort of working alongside people who put that training into practice, and you build your sense of self-efficacy and competence around particular skills. And that requires a focus. And that means it's very difficult to get to everybody, which I think comes back down to, to one's purpose. I think if we want to facilitate change, then there are going to be trade-offs we need to make between making it available to everybody who could possibly want it, and then focusing it in on those people who really need it, where change will be most will be felt the most.
Thanks. Yeah, really great thoughts, Jamie. We at Wild Team, we've been talking about translation of languages and stuff into different languages for years, but what we don't want to do is do it badly. So our hesitancy is we want to do it when we've got enough funding to do it right, and do it and trial it that way, and sort of, yeah, not kind of dive into doing it to a low standard. Maza, you also had your hand up.
You just answered my question. I kind of have a different view in terms of making it accessible for all. I think it cannot be for all. For some trainings, we have to make it accessible for all. That are not needed by all, then I agree with you. We can prioritize on individuals that would benefit the most, and that we can go on based on need. But I was about to add, we just had experience using a translator for our largest gathering we held last year, and it went really well because in addition to the AI, just Google translation version of audio, we hired live interpreters that come to each session and fact check, and there's actually a service that does exactly that, and we use that. And in terms of accessibility, one thing we made sure is, including the training by Wild Team, every training is offered at least in 2 or 3 time zones. That way we make sure that everyone located in other countries also have the accessibility based on their time zone. So, but there are small things you can do to make it more accessible and available for everyone who wants to take the training, because trainings like project management, many people can benefit and we cannot prioritize this.
Thanks very much. Yeah, I think for us, something we're guilty of with accessibility is being too waiting for people to ask for things. And it's not nice when you have to ask for something. So things like transcripts or subtitles for videos and things like that. Like, what I regret is not having more of that up front. And it's a time thing. I haven't had the time to invest, but we ask everyone that signs up to our workshop now, are there any special requirements you have? And in the hope that that can help us diversify the needs and the not always obvious accessibility requirements of people. Sometimes just being anxious to come to a live session is an accessibility issue because you're not going to get the most out of a training. So we try and address that, but I'm sure there's still so many things that we haven't addressed that we can do. So it's it's a learning journey. Anyone else who hasn't been from the panel want to add to this?
Just a slight comment, Beth, really. It's funny because I often joke with my students that you spend all this time gathering wisdom, and then because the time in which you gathered that wisdom passes, it's no longer relevant. You can't impart it anymore. But just picking up on what we've just said, I think there are some universal conservation wisdoms that we should think about. There are some, problems with content access culturally because each culture has its own specificity. But there are also some generalized conservation issues that are global. And I think some of those need thinking about and maybe addressing. And that is where, we can be more collegiate in our approach there.
Thanks very much, Mark. Any more comments from the panel? There's a few in the chat from Lucy. Thank you very much.
I just wanted to say in response to what Mark said, it'd be really lovely if we could talk either now or at some point in the future about how to be more collegiate, because my experience is that it can be really hard to collaborate across institutions. I've tried that in the past, and my hopes have founded on the difficulties of getting the institutions to set up an MOU that allows sharing. So I don't know if anyone has better experience than me.
I think the answer will be time. We have WAMs. WAMs are work allocation models. My WAM is at 123% at the moment. So basically, and I'm sure half of it's not recorded what I do. So I think some of that is better working. We need to think about that.
Okay, unmuted. Thanks. It'd be great. Yeah, any comments? There's a few coming in from the audience, but do you put any thoughts that you have on this topic, any experience, any wisdom from the audience? Do put it in the chat. That would be brilliant to hear. And I'm sorry if I don't have time to read it all out, but I would definitely go through it all at the end. Thank you. Stu, are you just unmuting yourself?
Yeah, just picking up on that point, I think it ties together the collaboration side as well as the interpretations as well. Kind of. I think there's some people who are. It's much to do with the organisations. I think setting up an MOU might determine that's between the two organisations or several organisations, whereas some collaborations can be facilitated down to the relationships that exist between individuals. And some trainers that we've worked with are extremely open to having their resources shared, becoming open access, translated into multiple languages. They help you find funding to do that translation. There's a book called Institutional Fundraising for Conservation Projects. We talk about fundraising as being a fundamental for bringing resources into delivering conservation action, as Mark's point. And those individuals who have created those documents have, they help find the funding, they help finding the translators, and they give give open responsibility to ensuring that those documents are being well used. So yeah, I think the relationships between trainers and building the relationships is really, really key. Yeah, translations is just, it's mega difficult. We want to be more accessible, and for our target audience, we know that there's English language for most of our training is an absolute fundamental. We've had whispering translators, which works really well. I put in the chat box, we've had interpreters we've brought back from our training network, which has worked well, but it hasn't led to that knock-on effect of developing separate modules, separate training courses, which would be fabulous. And yeah, really interested in seeing how we could take that forward.
Thanks so much. I'm going to move on to another question, but there's obviously a lot to be said about this, and a lot of discussion to be had. So yeah, if any of the panelists have any resources or anything, do email them to me afterwards, and I'll share them with the list of resources that I'll share with all the attendees. So thank you. We've got, okay, I'm gonna go for a technical question here, but on the link it in with a broader topic. Okay, so this one is the question was, how do you use AI, artificial intelligence, to mark assessments? So I'd love to hear the panel's thoughts on that, but I also wanted to link it in with the broader question of assessment. You've got the option of doing exams. At our team, we do multiple choice exams, and they're far from perfect, but they are very objective, and they're quick and they're efficient. You don't necessarily need exams. There's so many different ways of doing formative assessment, formal assessment. Yeah, so open that up to you guys.
I think I would favour peer assessment over artificial intelligence for assessment. I think there is scope for using AI, especially it's going to increase in sophistication in the future, but I worry about biases that are inherent in AI. And I think it's much more powerful to involve the learners on giving each other feedback, and really grappling with what each other is trying to do, and trying to be helpful and apply what they understand about concepts and practices to what their fellow learners are doing, and develop that community spirit rather than bringing in an AI. I'd love to know what anyone else thinks.
Over to Jamie next.
Well, I'm not going to, I've got no pearls of wisdom at all around artificial intelligence or even intelligence, to be honest. But what I pick up from what Lucy says, I would agree with, and that is, it's fine when you're talking about knowledge acquisition, understanding of concepts, things, which is kind of, I suppose, it's sort of more traditional sort of education-based learning, to look for some sort of automation. But the moment you get into the messiness of turning principles into practice, I think I struggle. I'd like to be corrected, but I struggle to see how you can avoid, whether it's peer assessment or expert assessment, people actually seeing you in practice, and then that exchange of the conversation then goes on afterwards or during between learner and the person who might have a bit more experience, to really deepen that understanding, and moving through to a point of kind of competence at doing something. Because most of the things we're talking about doing are not sort of making a cup of coffee. They are much more complex, and context specific. And so I think that, and there's often not a right answer. There are different ways of approaching it, and it's the rationale that you go through to decide how you are going to respond to the situation, which I think needs to have that human touch to really be able to get the most out of.
Thanks so much for sharing, Jamie. You have plenty to share on intelligence. Over to Mark next.
Thanks, Beth. Well, our students do both formative and summative assessments. personally, I'd abandon it all. But anyway, that's what the university thinks we should be doing. What I'm interested in, and I don't think an AI system would allow you to construct it, what I'm interested in is their voice. So their written voice. And they are sick to death of me banging on about, you've got to have a good scientific written voice if you want to communicate with a range of audiences. And I don't think that's something that AI could particularly contribute to. And I have, you know, I think this summer I read 180,000 words, and I gave feedback in 120 different documents. So I'm pretty jaundiced by marking, but it's essential. It allows you to give that feedback, that written feedback, and allows them to develop as communicators. How else are they going to do it? They have no other opportunity. They can't do it while they're in the job. It's too quick. There's too much going on. So when they're training, they have the luxury of the time to develop those skills.
Thanks so much, Mark. Yeah, what you say reminds me of the feedback is so important to students and people learning. And when I was doing my PhD, we used to help out on practicals and lessons. And I remember once the person running the training was actually my second PhD supervisor. The session, it was a debate session. We all kind of wrote our feedback afterwards for the students on how they debated. And she was really good. She's like, no, let's all stay here an extra 15 minutes because this feedback isn't good enough. We really need to give these students constructive feedback. That means saying things they did well and things they could do better. And it was really good lesson for me to actually put that effort into the feedback for students, because that's what they can use to help them improve.
We actually do feedback, which is a general statement of how they've done, and feed forward, which is how they can improve it in the future.
Nice. I like that one. Who else wants to go on this subject?
I think that they've all been answered quite well. I would say, to build on the feedback, the importance of that in terms of the individual feeling valued and feeling that they can grow in their work as well. I think if you have something artificial telling you got, you know, 80% or 50% or whatever it is, that's nice, that's rewarding, that's a number, but as we said, you're not going to grow and learn from that, and that's only going to feel fulfilling to a certain point. I think when you've put time into researching your answer and writing it and truly understanding the content and how you need to write your answer, then in someone investing just as much time in appreciating what you have done and your work, that sense of being valued and that sense of worth, I think, it speaks for itself as well, in terms of that, how they will then go on and invest in others. And I think a lot of this teaching is about teaching others to communicate and support and develop those human skills to feed back to others. And I think there's a lot of obvious ways we can do that, which is about teaching about those skills, but also doing them in a more subtle way that perhaps they're not aware of, and supporting them.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you so much, Helen. Yeah, and the challenge we have in the training we run is we do live sessions, and we do a lot of feedback and chatting and discussion and group work during that sort of informal feedback. But then the actual assessment, as I said, is a multiple choice exam, and we just don't have the capacity to mark them individually. It would put the price of the training up a lot, and that means we can train fewer people, and it's less accessible to a lot of people. So for us, it's kind of finding that balance, and that's quite an interesting one. Anyone else from the panel want to chip in on this massive topic?
Yeah, not on artificial intelligence for marking assessment, but more about the timing of assessments. And I mentioned about the sort of the readiness of trainees, and when they're coming to a course and hopefully being able to put something into practice, not too late after the training course has been delivered, but very often when we're looking at the impact of training courses, that can be felt quite a long time after the course has been finished. So thinking of most significant change and how a training course has impacted somebody it might take months, might take years until something's actually not been put into practice, but they go, yep, this is kind of boils down to what I learned in the training course. But there's also multiple other things that might have influenced that. That's a real challenge, I think, I think for capacity development. We've talked about it in capacity development for a number of years, but maybe with broader training courses is is recognizing where it's the training course that just made a difference, or the period of capacity development, the initiative, and how long that takes to really be felt and to be embedded. I don't know if that's hijacked the question, but maybe turn it around to the panel if there's time.
No, that's really interesting to hear. Yeah, panel, go for it.
I was just going to say, I was reading all the chat questions, so just going to be honest there.
Can I just ask Stu, do you have anything how you measure or how your trainees measure their readiness for learning? Do you use any tool or exercise for that? I'm just curious.
Well, we have, so when we have courses that there's a sort of competitive application process, we've started, based on some feedback from another group actually, is speaking to them individually and not just relying about what they've got on paper, but trying to get some sort of verbal commitment to the fact that they're going to be spending time on we'll be investing time, we expect them to be investing time, we want to see some deliverable at the end of it. The greatest readiness we have is if they've been selected to deliver a project. And so we're granting between $15,000 and $50,000 for them to be delivering a project. And so, they're already at that stage when they're going to be embarking on the project. Maybe they've already embarked on it. And based on prior assessments, we hope that training that we'll be delivering will be useful to help them deliver a project. Whether the project's successful or not is another thing, but whether they're going to learn through it.
Great. Thank you. Jamie, you've got your hand up. Was that from before?
Just to add to what Stu's saying, I think that combination of learning and opportunities to practice, and the proximity of those two are really helpful. And so whether it's a big thing, a big project lasting for multiple years, or a workshop that's going to take you 6 months to prepare for, or something that's going to be done in a day or two, or I think that in terms of criteria for selecting people for training, I think there's a combination that needs to come together that is going to increase the likelihood that intellectual development will get turned into change of practice.
Thank you. Helen, do you have your hand up?
And the thumbs up and everything as well. Yes. So I was just going to sort of build upon that and say that, comment on the timing of being able to practice what they've been trained. And one process I think a lot of organizations are adopting now is that ongoing support after training as well. So it's obviously something we're doing here at Durrell. Many other organizations through leadership programs are adopting this, because I think, as one of the comments I made earlier, is we can develop a lot through this training, but then there's almost like this sort of, you're hanging on the edge of a cliff, because you either then don't get to use those skills at all, or you're forced into using them straight away without any kind of practice or support. And I think there's just an assumption that once you've been given the information, you can then successfully apply it. And you can, but there's going to be a long bumpy road in between then. So I think providing that ongoing support after courses and timing that in and feeding that into that plan is really, really valuable. And it doesn't necessarily have to be in terms of ongoing teaching, but just having an additional person to mentor or coach you through, or team you up. And I think so many organizations are also adopting this mentoring and coaching approach, which I think is really invaluable. As a lot of what we've talked about is it's not just this technical skills training, it's about helping them grow as individuals and really utilize those strengths, because each conservation scenario is so specific and unique, and you're not going to be able to attend a course that answers all your questions. So gaining advice and experience from others to support you as you apply those skills is really important.
Thanks, Helen. We've just got 3 minutes left. So I'm just going to throw one question out there, and you know, throw in any thoughts very quickly in the chat panel, or you know, your speed thoughts on this one. This is from Elsie. How do you take into account different learning styles in your online courses or courses generally? Yeah, learning styles is a massive topic, and I always have a lot to say on like when people say about visual learners and all those other different types of learners, and that's kind of all quite outdated now, but it kind of helps to still frame designing or training. So yeah, does anyone want to jump in with thoughts on that? Mazza, you hand up.
We kind of do both. We have what we call conservation training that's open to all staff, and it's a guided, self-guided training that anyone can sign up, any staff can sign up and take. But then we have the other ones which I organize specifically for the scientists, and different teams do the same thing. But what we find is that, as you rightly pointed out, Elsie, is that people have preferences. Some want online learning without guidance from instructors, but the majority, in my experience, want the virtual mixed with the in-person, which is not possible now, but the hybrid version of the trainings, depending on the course offered. So we really do keep that in mind, but it's not as effective as I want it to be, I think.
Thanks. Let's go for 30 seconds for Lucy, and then if we have time, Mark.
When I've looked at the evidence base for some of the stuff about learning styles, I haven't always been convinced that you can categorize people that neatly, but I do think it's really valuable to offer learning in different modes so that people can pick and choose and have choices, and also give them choices about how they're assessed for their work, which is something I'm trying to build in more to my courses.
Great, yeah, cool. Thank you so much, Lucy. And Mark, final word with you.
People will go on training courses and there's a high probability they won't use what they learn. If you teach them to think, they will 100% always use what they learn. We need more thinking courses.
That's a wonderful way to wrap up. More thinking courses. Thank you, Mark. So I'm going to wrap up there because I realise lots of you will have other places to go, dinners to eat, cups of teas, etc., other meetings, whatever. So a massive thank you to the panel. That was just, yes, so much in there. It was really cool to hear. So, you know, they've all given a lot of time to this and thought and preparation leading up to that. So massive thank you to the panel. Thank you very much to the audience. We will share the recording. I will, you know, put together some resources, and yeah, it's been really fun. So thank you. And thank you to Mac and to Terza for helping in the background. That's been lovely. And yeah, hope you all have lovely rest of the days wherever you are in the day, and stay in touch. Any questions, I think you all have my email. Thank you very much. All right, take care, everyone. Bye.
Bye. Yes, we go.